The third world immigration that has been flooding Western Europe, Australia, the United States, Canada and New Zealand has been sold to the native masses as a quest for greater diversity, to pursue a false utopian prosperity of a high-functioning and progressive melting pot, basing itself on the bigoted and truly racist conviction that white people lack culture and diversity. What has this flood led to instead? An economic, social and total utter failure. Literal hundreds of different features between the peoples of these victim nations plainly present an incredibly various and special pre-existing diversity, starting from the phenotypes, which manifest extremely wide differences, producing the most fascinatingly stunning features, all the way to behavioral distinctnesses deriving from cultural and historical contexts. All colorations of eyes, facial structures, body builds, hair amounts and distributions, heights, while simultaneously all kinds of faiths, traditions, dogmas. This symphony of variety characterizes the most colorful abundance of heterogeneity. Languages like Spanish, Italian, Romanian and Portuguese sound very similar. Despite being mostly indistinguishable from the perspective of content, they have incredibly kindred feels and sounds. The same applies to Germanic, Slavic, Uralic and many other language families, which have bonded hundreds of millions, yet allowed them to achieve their respective autochthonous identities. The Italian Americans faced real racism and discrimination upon their arrival in New York, despite sharing close similarities with the relatively new European settlers, the American white New Yorkers. However, that did not stop them from almost entirely happily participating and sweating for the good of society. Even though crime was no absent at the time among their population, it was occurring at a minuscule scale compared to how prevalent it is now within immigrant populations of South American, African, Middle Eastern and Asian clusters in Europe and the Western world today. Over time, the Italian American became a culture of its own, birthed by the struggle of the immigrants that truly valued and loved the United States for becoming their new reality. It reached a model balance between devotion for the heredity and acknowledgement of the host, perfectly portraying the ideal type of immigration, which must always encompass respect, honor, dignity, and will to move forward. Whoever out there holds in their heart the belief that Europe is not diverse and possesses a stagnant or even non-existent culture is either an outright blind ignorant or a willful malevolent liar. Poland and the Czech Republic share 796 kilometers of direct land border, but are homes to two remarkably unique peoples. As of 2021, the Czechs were 47.8% irreligious, and only 9.3% of them embraced the Catholic faith. Luckily, we have the statistics of the same year for the Polish. 71.3% of them still preached Catholicism over 2,000 years after the life of Jesus Christ. On one hand, a country that lays its Christian roots before the year 1000, in the heart of which sits a majestic land. On this soil, the first documented ruler of Poland, Prince Mieszko I, immersed his flesh in water, washing away his sins. Once his eyes reopened and he re-emerged, his new spiritual life began, as he held all current and future countrymen by the hand, marking the baptism of Poland on April 14, 966. Conversely, with the profound martyrdom of Jan Hus, the immense work of Martin Luther, and the ceaseless sacrifices of 21,000 Bohemians in the Battle of White Mountain of 1620, the religious skepticism and anti-Catholic sentiments survived for centuries among the Czechs, even in secrecy at times of constraint. When Polish and Czech people meet, they treat each other like equals because they also recognize their histories of growth. On June 10, 1940, Mussolini's Italy joins Nazi Germany in the fight by declaring war on Britain and France. From that moment onwards, 161,729 men take their final breath in the name of the Royal Italian Army. The estimated amount of civilian casualties is more or less the same, around 150,000, many of which were wiped out in their pivotal despair due to air raids, dying helplessly under a sky of death. Following the government's surrender to the Allies on September 8th of 1943, the Nazis invaded all of the north and central part of the country, dirtying their hands with the blood of tens of thousands more Italians, partisans, civilians, and interned soldiers. Over 18,000 in Italy, but also a bit less than 55,000 in the rest of Europe. Nowadays, not a soul will hear anything even remotely close to a bilateral hatred or desire of mass extermination between Germans and Italians, despite the past. That's because they are brothers. 35,000 German citizens live in Italy, and around 500,000 Italian citizens reside in Germany. Over 160 billion euros are flown through two-sided trade in 2024 alone between the two countries. That's how far their true recognition and love is for each other. In 2024, 1.45 billion people roamed the streets of foreign countries. If we excluded Turkey's tourism, as is quite different from its Western neighbors, it would still remain blatantly apparent that the preferred choice for tourists worldwide is of white European countries. By summing up the 2024 arrivals in descending order, you would have France, Spain, Italy, the United Kingdom, Germany, and Greece. Not only do they take up 2 out of 3 rankings in the top 3, but they are 6/10ths in amount, meaning that they have received 368.9 million people out of a total of 583.3 million. That is equal to 63.2%. The statistic which shouts the cultural superiority of European countries even more regards their dominant representation among World Heritage Sites. The total amount of them is 2 sites shy of 1,250, scattered around 170 total countries. Though, if you observe the 23 which have 15 or more, this is what you see. Italy starts off with the largest global amount, 61. Proceeding down the list, you find Germany, France, Spain, UK, Russia, Greece, the Czech Republic, Poland, Portugal, Belgium, and finally Sweden. In other words, 52% in position. Europeans do not deserve any lethally forced diversity with disastrous foreigners as a punishment for how they have pioneered the world towards unthinkable degrees of development by serving as the best examples of highness in their native soils and in foreign, conquered lands. The Europeans have maintained an incredibly rich diversity whilst upbringing the rest of the world by spreading their advancements. No amount of imported rapists, killers, tax cheats, drug dealers and threats to our economies and our people will improve lives in any way. Not ours, not theirs, and neither their unfortunate ones back home. The next time someone tells you that your doors must stay always wide open for those who despise you to death, remember the tale of the fall of Europe.